couple of weeks ago, I was in sunny Bordeaux, taking a look at the latest generation Suzuki Swift. But whilst I was able to embrace the new car, I had to do it all by memory as to what had changed compared to the outgoing model. We also was driving European cars, so we didn't know the final specifications for the UK ones. So, a few weeks later, I'm at my local John Banks dealer, where they very kindly lent me two Suzuki Swifts. One of the new Swifts and one of the old Swifts. And in today's video, I'm going to show you everything that's changed between the two models. So if that sounds good, then please keep watching. And if you like new car reviews and car content, then you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you wanted to also either get a great deal on an outgoing Swift or a brilliant deal on a new one, then you can do that at John Banks. I'll pop their details in the description box. But first of all, let's take a look at both cars and see what's changed for the new generation. Suzuki aren't fooling anyone. This isn't the upgrade of the century. It's not a whole new car. It looks very familiar to the outgoing model. There's just been a few subtle changes, and we're going to run through them together now. So probably the most obvious thing you'll notice is the bonnet line, and this has been a little bit controversial. The outgoing model has a straight and less prominent bonnet line, whereas the curved line of the new Swift is the focal point. This bonnet slightly overlaps to give the appearance of it being open. This line continues around the whole car to give a floating, horizon-like appearance. I actually don't mind it. I think it gives it a cutesy feel. They've definitely rounded the new version. And you'll also notice the badge has moved. So on the outgoing model, it's in the centre of the grille, and on this new model, it's on top of the bonnet just below that bonnet line. The lights are also slightly different, and they have a slightly different lighting signature. So on the outgoing model, it runs all the way around the bottom of the light, whereas on the new model, they're calling it the L lighting signature because it finishes in just a simple L, and the lights are just a bit more simple. What else? Well, let's talk about the grille because that's something which is significantly changed. Previously, you had a matte black grille, and you'll see you've got a chrome bar which runs along the centre. Now on the new model, I really like this. It's vastly improved. You now have a gloss black grille, and once again, it's a little bit more rounded, it's a little bit larger. A lot of people have said it looks a bit like a Ford Puma, and I would care to agree. As you can see, you also have a slightly more sculpted bottom diffuser at the bottom there as well. But overall, the looks are really growing on me. I definitely like it in this two-tone finish, and the blue looks exceptionally good. And that's one of my favourite things about the latest generation of Suzuki Swift. There's so many colours to choose from. There's 8 colour combinations, and then you can also have the option of having a black roof. So let's just run through the new colours. The free colour option is now Flame Orange Pearl Metallic. The following colours are all a £600 option: Pure White, Mineral Grey, Super Black, Premium Silver, and the new colour, Cool Yellow. Burning Red Pearl and Frontier Blue Pearl will set you back a further £100, and for an extra £50 on top again, you can have the Pure White and Cool Yellow with a grey roof and grey door mirrors, and the most expensive paint option at £850 feature the Burning Red Pearl or Frontier Blue Pearl with a black roof and door mirrors. I've actually specifically chosen 2 models of a similar specification. So this was the entry-level outgoing model, and this is now the entry-level new model, although there is a very simple layout of models. So you simply have the Motion and the Ultra. It's a lot like the S-Cross as well. And the main way that you can tell the difference is by looking at the wheels. So they both get 16-inch alloy wheels. However, if you go for the Motion model, like I've got here, they're a solid colour. But if you go for the Ultra top spec, then they become two-tone. So that's the main way you can tell whether you're looking at a Motion or an Ultra. And there's a few other differences, which I'll talk about when I look at both of these cars. Now, looking at the outgoing model, it also gets 16-inch alloy wheels as standard, and I slightly prefer this design. But here's the thing with Suzukis. They often change up the styles of their alloy wheels. So you might not like the alloy wheels currently on the new model, but they'll likely change them in the future. However, I still think for the affordability and the price of this vehicle, I'm just glad they're still doing alloys. Is it just me, or is this game of spot the difference getting harder and harder? Sure, the changes around the back are also very minimal, but I do like the changes, and I think they do modernise the Swift slightly, although it's a very similar car. Those changes include a new rear extended spoiler. Yeah, it's very, very minimal, but you get a little bit more framing and it just looks more prominent. You also get some new lights. So the outgoing model had these solid red lights, and the new model gets a 3D design. They're almost clear and floating. I really like those. They're very similar to the new lights that you get on the Renault Clio, and I think it's improved the car. You'll also see the loss of the Suzuki. They don't think you need Suzuki on the back. They've just left the Swift on there. And you'll also see a change in the positioning of the rear view camera. So before, the rear view camera was actually tucked under here with this rear plate, whereas now it's actually further up, just underneath the Suzuki badge. And although this doesn't look quite as smooth and minimal, it does mean that less dirt is going to get on it, because the dirt kicks up and that will get really dirty under there, and it will just shield it a bit more in its new position. The view of the rear view camera previously was very narrow and covered a very small area. Whilst the new camera still isn't the highest in definition, the line of view is now much wider. I just wish they'd add guidelines that bend as you turn the wheel. You also now get rear parking sensors as standard on the entry-level car, which I think's brilliant because I've driven one of these before, and because you've got a rear view camera, you just assume that you're going to have parking sensors, and the next thing you know, yeah, you've reversed into something. So I'm really glad they've also made those standard. Now, as I mentioned, the dimensions are almost exactly the same in the Swift. So how about boot space? Well, that's exactly the same. Both cars get 265 litres of boot space. And just like the boot space, rear interior space hasn't really changed either. So we're not going to be talking about additional legroom or headroom, but there are some significant changes in the back of the Swift. The first of which is how you get there. The rear door handles. So on this outgoing Swift, you'll notice they're up in the top quarter. Now, the reason they did this is because when this was launched as a facelift, it was at a time when we were obsessed with 3-door cars and we wanted all of our cars to look sporty. So that's why they put them up here, so it almost looked like a 3-door. But they're actually a bit impractical. If you've ever had a car where the door handles are up here, if friends aren't used to them, they struggle to get into the doors at first. And also, children can't use them because they can't reach up there. So they've changed them to more conventional handles. Right, let's pop inside so I can tell you a big change which I think is quite an improvement. And that big improvement you can find on the doors. So in this lower spec model of the outgoing model, it had windy windows. How really old school. Whereas in the new car, it has changed to have fully electric windows in the rear of every single model. However, there is one thing that the new generation car has lost. In the back of this passenger seat, I've got a map pocket. But in the new car, I haven't got one, which is a bit of a shame. But let's face it, if I had to choose between a map pocket and rear electric windows, I know which one I'm going for. The disappointing thing is they hadn't added any extra practicality in the Swift. So we still haven't got a centre armrest with any cup holders, and there's still no charging in the rear, which is a bit of a shame. You still have access to a cup holder like in the previous car, and you also get space for a bottle in the doors, which is also the same. Now, you do have to go for the Ultra model of the Swift if you want to get handles in the back here, and you can also get some rear ventilation. Now, I'm not talking about rear air vents, I'm just talking about ventilation which is underneath the driver's seat. So how much you'll actually feel the benefit of, I don't know. But in terms of practicality and carrying passengers, well, it's just a city car at the end of the day. Leg space is okay, headroom is all right as well, and it's slightly comfortable back here, but you're not going to be able to fit 3 people in the back here for long journeys. You also still get the option of 2 ISOFIX fitments. Let's start with the interior of the outgoing Suzuki Swift. I've always quite liked the interiors of these cars, especially the steering wheel. I've always thought the steering wheel feels a bit sporty and a bit special. You've also got loads and loads of functions on this wheel. So you've got adaptive cruise control, that's standard across the existing range of the Suzuki Swift. And then you've got some volume buttons, and also you can control your phone via the dials behind the steering wheel. You've also got some buttons just down your right hand side, which includes your auto start stop off, and also a function to turn off your anti-collision warning. Across the cabin, as you'll see, you've got a mix of colours. Mostly it's finished in black, and then you've got this perforated bar of white, almost feels like leather, but I think it's made to look like leather across the centre. It's quite pleasant. You've also got those quirky round air vents that Suzuki are known for. They kind of bubble on top of the dashboard. You've got a touchscreen, which is integrated into the dash, and then you've got some manual dials for your climate control underneath. Air conditioning as standard on the entry-level outgoing model, and then below these climate control dials, you have got a 12-volt charging point and 1 USB, and also a headphone jack, which is a bit strange, but that means, oh, it's an aux lead, isn't it? That was me showing my age. Yep. I don't think I've ever used an aux lead in a car, so it is strange that they still had those. I've proper showed myself up then. But that means there's only just 1 USB in the whole of the outgoing Swift. You can see where I'm going here. 2 cup holders, a bit of storage. You've got a manual gearbox here, a little bit of chrome surrounding the gearbox, and then you've just got a very simple centre console with a manual handbrake. You've got some very nice seats. They're not the highest in quality. They are cloth, but you've got a nice bit of bolstering on the sides, and these are mostly finished in black. And you have this almost diamond Mercedes effect down the centre. These are pretty nice. This is a cheap car, so you can't expect luxury. And then you've got a light white, off-white headlining in this too. It's a nice place to be in the existing Swift, but we're not here to talk about the existing one, are we? So let's hop into the new one and take a look in there. So straight out of the old car and into the new, and let's see how many things I can see that have changed. Well, instantly I can tell that there's a different colour combination. So rather than predominantly having a black dash, you now have contrasting black and white on the dash. Now, I'm going to go back on something. I don't often do this, but when I drove this car in Bordeaux, I didn't like the two-tone colourway. I thought that it highlighted the cheap materials. But now looking at it, I quite like it. It's just a bit more fun, it's a bit more interesting, and it kind of makes the car look a bit more different from the outgoing model. Let's face it, if it was all black, it would be very similar in here. You'll also notice that those iconic round air vents are now more traditional. So you've now got the horizontal air vents, which are on the edges and also underneath the touchscreen as well. The touchscreen, this is different. This is now a larger touchscreen, and it sits atop the dash rather than in it. We'll talk about a bit more about this in a moment. You've also now got digital style climate control dials on all versions of the Swift, although if you want them to be automatic, then you need to go for the top spec Ultra, but these are fine enough. They do feel a bit more modern than the outgoing knobs that you've got in the old one. Here's some changes I really like. So down here, you've got extra charging. See, I told you I was going somewhere with that. You've still got a 12-volt charger, and you've still got a USB charger. I'm having to think about this. But you've now got an extra USB, so 2 USBs and a USB-C, which I think is brilliant because USB-C chargers are quicker. And this means if you really wanted your rear seat passengers to charge their devices, they could trail a cable onto that instead. And you also get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto wireless on this new version. But as I said, I'm getting ahead of myself and I'll talk about the technology in a moment. The steering wheel is still here. It's pretty much exactly the same. You have got a slightly lighter chrome detailing on this model here. The seats, now they're slightly lighter, almost exactly the same. Still got that bolstering. They look exactly the same, but they are lighter. And between the lighter parts of the dashboard and the lighter seats and the existing lighter interior on the headlining, it feels really light and airy in here. I am starting to prefer it. I didn't think I would. I also like the little details that you have some lighter stitching on the lever of the gear selector as well. Makes it feel a bit more premium. You've still got handbrake, but you've got the addition of 2 extra buttons on this entry level car. Heated seats. The Swift now from entry on the Motion car gets heated seats as standard, which I think personally is fantastic. There's also an extra button just to the right of that steering wheel as well. In fact, there's a couple of extra buttons, but mostly there's a start button because it also comes keyless from the entry-level model as well. So loads more tech than before. Next up, let's talk technology. As you can see, this is the outgoing screen in the Swift. It sits within the dashboard. It's not too bad. It's still a nice screen, but it is slightly small in size, and also it's not the most inspiring in how it's laid out. You'll find your volume on the side, which you can slide up and down, and you've also got an on-off button in the centre there. You also have some shortcut buttons along the side, but these are all touch sensitive. This is your home screen, including your radio, your phone, your media, and also your Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which will sit here if it's connected via a USB. If we hit the radio, you'll see this is the different settings and how they're laid out. The settings here is not exactly the most inspiring, and you do have to fiddle around to get to your required settings that you're looking for. It's okay, it's very simple, but it is slightly boring and not particularly modern. This new screen is far superior. This is the one that you'll find in the more expensive and larger S-Cross. It sits atop the dash rather than within it, and I think that's better for your line of sight. You'll also see the new addition of a little camera. Now this is a facial recognition camera to make sure your eyes are always on the road. As you'll see, there's a much clearer layout and it's much more modern than the one it replaces. On the left-hand side, you now get satellite navigation as standard on the Swift. This isn't always the quickest system, but it's great to have this as standard on the new car. You'll also find new sections for things like your driving averages and how economical the car is. Other things include your radio settings as before, and you'll also find your car settings at the bottom of the screen, and as you can tell, they are far better laid out than the outgoing model. You also now get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but they're wireless, so you don't even need to use one of those 2 USBs. It's definitely not always true that modern is better, and I know that a lot of people actually prefer analog dials over digital instrument clusters. And though the new Swift doesn't have digital instrument clusters, it has to be said that I really like this old setup. It really does feel very sporty. It has that red glow, even though this is the entry-level model. When you compare it to the new model, though it hasn't gone completely digital, it does feel just a little bit boring compared to the outgoing model. It doesn't have that racy red glow, and also you have these really strange extended controls. Now these change some of the functions which are displayed on the cluster, but it just feels a little bit cheap. I really think I prefer the old one when it comes to this. The existing Swift has been hybrid only for a little while now, and it features a 1.2 litre 4-cylinder petrol unit, producing 83 brake horsepower. The 12-volt mild hybrid system provides just a little assistance when accelerating. It achieves an MPG average of 57.2. It gets a top speed of 112 miles per hour and a 0 to 62 time of 13.1 seconds. The Swift has always been characterised as handling sweetly, paired together with an engine which is just about right for its size and a gearbox which is smooth with short manual changes. The suspension is a little firmer than some of its rivals, as well as having a reasonable amount of noise from both the engine itself and the road. Whilst the engine in the new car is still the same 1.2-litre petrol mild hybrid, it's actually lost a cylinder, bringing it down to 3 cylinders, causing a bit of worry online. However, the engine offers up to 8% better fuel economy to 64.2 miles per gallon. The power output remains the same at 83 brake horsepower, with a slightly higher torque figure at 112 Newton meters at just 4,500 RPM. Acceleration time to 62 is improved by 5% to 12.5 seconds for the manual model and 11.9 seconds for the optional CVT. It's only very slightly heavier than the outgoing model, so it still handles sweetly and actually corners very well. For a car with a little engine, it can be a lot of fun, but the focus has been more about refinement and fuel economy. Suzuki have introduced a number of new aerodynamic design aspects, including the first use of a torsion beam cover for the rear axle and a neat spoiler. Underbody spoilers and stakes are also included. The whole body exterior has also been optimised for better aerodynamics. During development, efforts were made to reduce noise, vibration and harshness for improved ride comfort and a quieter cabin. Suzuki applied sound and vibration adhesive to the underbody to minimise noise and vibration transmission into the cabin, especially on rough roads. More intuitive safety tech has been added as standard, including things like rear cross-traffic alert and cyclist detection. Also, technical advancements have been made to the adaptive cruise control, including the space left between cars which has been reduced, even adding an additional level. The car will now also predictively slow down when corners approach when cruise control is being used. Sure, you might not like all of the changes when it comes to the styling, but you have to admit, the changes that they've made to the latest generation Swift just make it more appealing than ever before. More standard specification. I can't believe you get those heated seats. You also get the adaptive cruise control, the rear view camera and parking sensors, keyless entry, all as standard. I think that's really impressive. Sure, it feels a little bit cheap in places, but you've got to compromise somewhere, right? But let me know, what do you think of the new model of Suzuki Swift? Have they improved it or did you prefer the outgoing model? Pop all of your comments in the details down below. I really hope you have enjoyed the video. If you have, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. If you want to see more, then you're in the right place. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss a video from me. And of course, like I said at the start of the video, if you did want to take a look at the new generation of Suzuki Swift, then you can do that at John Banks. We've got it in all sorts of colours and different specification combinations for you to take a look at. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And until next time, see you later.